Oh, is-
Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, I will ask everyone to please silence any cell phones or other electronic devices, and I will endeavor to do the same. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. by recognizing the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Olduville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga and Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The Council of the Municipality of Brighton respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga nations are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity and continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. And we'll begin with a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council approve the May 8th, 2023 planning meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. We'll note that Councillor Butler has sent regrets for this evening. Members of Council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to our statutory public meeting. Council is conscious of our duty to provide expeditious decisions, especially under new provincial planning regimes. The municipality holds a statutory public meeting on planning applications to capture comments and concerns from the public. Council will then receive a staff report with a recommendation on which Council will make a decision. After Council has made our decision, any person or public body may appeal Council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as long as they have made an oral submission at the statutory public meeting where the planning matter was heard or provided comments in writing to the clerk's office before or during the statutory public meeting where the planning matter was heard and requested notice of the decision from the clerk's office. This is also true of any person or public body that wishes to participate in the appeal. For details or information on appealing decisions of Council, please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. And with that, I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Ferretis, that Council move into the statutory public meeting May 8th, 2023 at 6:34 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The item in the statutory public meeting is Brighton Gateway Mixed Use Development File Z01 2023. Applicant 859-859-7685 Canada Incorporated. And Mr. Warren, I didn't get notes for this one, so we'll just wait a second for the notes. But we can go with by what method and on what date was notice of this application given.
Those notes were late getting to the clerk too, so I will state that. Notice of the meeting, notice of the statutory public meeting was provided via the Brighton Independent on April the 6th. And on April the 4th, a public notice sign was placed on the subject lands. And notice of the public meeting was mailed to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands. In terms of department and agency comments, there were no objections from either municipal departments or external agencies on the application.
Thank you. And now I need my notes.
Well, the next part is the purpose and reason.
Do you want to carry forward with that then, sir?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The purpose and effect of the application is that the proponent is seeking to rezone the subject lands, which are at the They're at the southeast corner of Rundle Lane and Main Street, which is also Highway 2 in that area. They're seeking to rezone the subject lands from the highway commercial HC-17-8 zone, or H zone, in accordance with the zoning bylaw as it currently stands. They are looking to remove the holding provision, as well as adding special provisions regarding permitting apartment dwelling units and reduction in parking and setback requirements in order to support the proposal for a 3-story mixed-use building as well as a 4-story apartment building. I don't want to steal any thunder from our presentation from our proponent's consultant, but I will say the site is currently vacant. It's being utilized primarily for parking and storage of construction activities related to the Brighton retirement living. And just 2 more notes from staff at this time. First, there was a numerical error in the report regarding the amount of commercial floor area. The amount should be corrected to 1,333 square meters rather than 13,333 square meters. I apologize for that error and any misunderstanding that may have led to for others. Secondly, subsequent to the report being submitted for tonight's agenda, specifically last Wednesday, staff did receive 1 item of correspondence from a local resident in opposition to the proposal from a Mr. Gaudet, I believe. And it's really all I have at this point. I will note that the presentation, or the applicant's agent does have a presentation for council this evening.
Is the applicant's agent on Zoom?
They're here in person.
Oh, hi, Ruth. Why don't we do that now, and then we'll go into questions or comments from members of the public.
Thank you again. I'm Ruth Ferguson Althouse with RFA Planning Consultant. I'm here on behalf of the development team for the Gateway project in Brighton, the subject of the rezoning application. And on Zoom, I have Melanie Lamontagne from Hoban Architects in Ottawa, Cody Oram from Monument. He's the project engineer. And Chris Donegal is also on Zoom, and I believe Jeff Mysick is also joining the call, also on Zoom on behalf of the applicant, Mistral. The next slide, please. The subject lands here are shown outlined in green, are 0.98 hectares in area. They're at the western portion of the Brighton urban area. They are designated in the Brighton official plan as highway commercial, special development area number 15. And they are currently zoned highway commercial -17-H zone. And both the official plan designation and the zoning were approved in 2018. And Mistral Developments and were the applicants at that time, and I acted on their behalf for that application. And the first phase of that project is Brighton Retirement Living, which is now well under construction. So this is the remaining component of that application and is zoned highway commercial. There's 61.7 meter frontage on Main Street and 130 meters on Rundle Lane. As referenced, not shown on this slide because it's an older aerial photo, is Brighton Retirement Living, immediately adjacent and under construction. And this site is currently vacant and used as storage for the Brighton Retirement Living construction. Next slide. We had a formal pre-consultation meeting with municipal staff in August 2022 and filed the application for rezoning. February 17th, 2023. My firm prepared the planning justification report and an urban design review as required by the pre-consultation. As well, Hoban Architects prepared a site plan, artistic renderings, and elevations as part of that rezoning submission package. And since then, a formal site plan application has also been filed. We've received comments on those site plans and are working on a second submission. Next slide. Just to highlight again and summarize the nature of the rezoning, which is shown on the parcel outlined in gray, which is the special highway commercial HC 17-H zone. The zoning will make some amendments to this HC-17 zone, and they are to cover the following. It will permit apartment units on any story as a permitted use. It will increase the maximum building height from 12 meters to 15 meters, and this will allow one of the buildings to be 4 stories in height. It will reduce the required number of parking spaces for commercial uses on the site slightly by about 9 spaces. There will be an increase of the maximum exterior side yard setback and a slight reduction in the minimum landscape buffer strip height and width along Rundle Lane. And finally, the holding symbol will be removed. Next slide. This slide shows the proposed site plan. There are 2 entrances to the site from Rundle Lane. There are no entrances from Main Street. That was one of the inputs from the municipal staff. The building A is the smaller building at the north end of the site, and it is a 4-story apartment building. And south of that is a mixed-use building called Building B, and it is a 3-story mixed-use building. In total, there are 41 seniors independent apartment units across the 2 buildings. These apartment units will be 1-bedroom plus den units or 2-bedroom units, and they will be priced at market rents and designed to meet CMHC efficiency and accessibility guidelines. On the site, the western and southern parking areas are intended for the commercial uses, and the eastern parking areas are intended for the residents of the apartments. And finally, there will be an easement that will be granted to Brighton Retirement Living for an access route to its loading zone. And there is a 1.8 meter privacy fence or screen along the south property line next to the existing residence. Next slide. This shows the overall site design in bird's eye view of both Brighton Retirement Living and the Gateway project. So the Brighton Retirement Living, or BRL, is on the left-hand side of the slide, and it's well under construction now. And the building A is the red building at the lower right corner of the slide, and the 3-story mixed-use building at the top southern portion of the site. The 2 sites are intended to operate as one. It's one developer and operator and owner that will manage the site as one campus of care. There will be a pedestrian connection to Brighton Retirement Living, and you'll see that those white sidewalks on the asphalt. And there's connectivity ensured between all 3 buildings, and they will share outdoor amenities. The residents that live at the Gateway will be able to access the meal program and other services there for a fee. The mixed-use design will contribute to creating a complete community surrounded by a diversity of uses to serve the residents that live on site, as well as the surrounding area. So residents in Brighton Retirement Living or their guests will be able to use the commercial services in the mixed-use building. And by the same token, the residents in the Gateway apartments will be able to take advantage of the services offered at the Brighton Retirement Living. As well, the building material palette will be coordinated to connect the commercial and residential features and to ensure that they all have the same aesthetic appeal. Next slide. This is a elevation and rendering of building A, which is the 4-story apartment building that has 15 units. That's located at the intersection of Main Street and Rundle Lane. This building is 120 meters from the south lot line, and it's for this building that the special bylaw provision for height has been requested to allow for the 4th story. The entrance to Building A will be at the south facade, as seen here, and will be accentuated by a canopy and a drop-off and pickup area. There'll be high-quality landscape treatments surrounding the building and on all public streets. Next slide. This is a rendering and elevation of Building B, and the design features for it are summarized on this slide. It, as I mentioned, is a mixed-use building. It has ground floor commercial facing Rundle Lane, and there are 26 residential apartments that face both east and west on the second and third floor. The commercial uses, which are already permitted by the highway commercial zone, will be uses such as retail stores, medical offices, and professional services, entirely on the west side. The commercial ground level, as you can see in this slide showing the rendering, will be designed with glass curtain walls, and the ground on the east side will have a separate entrance and lobby on the east side for residential uses. The layout is intended to separate the commercial and residential parking areas and to allow the residential suites to face onto smaller parking areas and to Brighton retirement living. Next slide. The staff report provides a very thorough overview of the planning policies that apply to this rezoning application. And I just highlight them here that these lands are within the Brighton urban area where growth and development is to be focused. It is adjacent to a delineated built-up area, and it's a logical progression for development. It's within the urban area on the Northumberland County official plan, and through the analysis of our planning report as well as the Brighton staff report, the rezoning application is consistent with the 2020 provincial policy statement, and as well it conforms to the growth plan and the Northumberland County official plan. Next slide. This slide shows the extract from the Brighton official plan. The purple denotes the highway commercial land use designation, and the black outline shows the subject property. And both Brighton retirement living and this property were designated in a special development area 15 designation that permits both commercial uses and residential developments in the form of seniors housing. The rezoning conforms to the highway commercial and these SDA 15 policies of the Brighton official plan. Next slide. This is a detailed overview of the highway commercial HC 17 zone review, and it shows how the zone provisions and what is proposed in the site plan match up, or the proposed site plan actually well exceeds the minimum requirements in the HC zone. There are special provisions in bold that are shown on the chart, and this is an extract from my planning report. These additional provisions are fairly minor, and for that reason, the zoning bylaw that's been prepared keeps the HC 17 zone provisions with these slight exceptions. So the minimum exterior side yard is being increased slightly, and that allows the building to be set back further from Rundle Lane than 12 meters. So it's at 16 meters, and this allows for some parking to be provided near Rundle Lane for the commercial uses. Would point out the minimum rear yard is 9 meters in the HC 17 zone, but we're proposing a rear yard setback that is 3 times that amount at 26.5 meters. So this building will be set back significantly at a greater distance than the zone would allow from the residential uses to the south. The building height is being increased as from 12 meters to 15 meters, and this will only apply to Building A, which is near Main Street and Rundle Lane intersection. So that is the 4-story building with the 15 apartments in it. You'll see that their landscape buffer strip, there's been some variations on that, and that is to 0.6 and 0.7 meters from the minimum. And this was to allow for the parking to be provided on site. And there are 117 parking spaces, which is 7 fewer than required under the zoning bylaw. So we've asked for special provisions for that. The municipal staff report has reduced that further to 109 spaces in the draft bylaw. There will be sharing of parking between the residents and the commercial uses, but we feel that those parking revisions are very minor, given that it's a mixed-use site. Just one last slide and to summarize the application, that we are amending the HC-17 zone for the subject property. These additional special provisions facilitate the development of a 4-story apartment building and a 3-story mixed-use building on the site. The urban form and design will create an attractive gateway at the Brighton West urban area. That concludes my formal presentation, but we do have as well the other members of the development team on the Zoom call, and we would be happy to answer any questions of the Planning Council.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson Althouse. I will ask if there are members of the public who have questions or comments with regard to the subject application first. I'm going to the far corner. Just come to the microphone, please.
Evening, everyone. I'm Rick from Lens RV. I'm the manager at the store. I've been asked to represent our property. Thank you. And I guess for us, it's we're not against development at that location. What we are about is parking, of course, in everyone's backyard. My major concern on Rundle Lane is we're putting a lot of cars into that intersection. And not only cars, but trucks delivering goods and services, and from trailer deliveries to furniture store deliveries. So there's a lot of action going to go into that corner. And we have 40-foot tractor trailers delivering parts to our store through our rear entrance. And if there's not enough parking at this new location or proposal, then they're going to dump onto the street to park. And if that happens, we've got a problem, because those 40-foot trucks can't turn on Rundle Lane. It's not wide enough. We need a wide turn. We need the full both lanes to make that turn. I do recommend that it should be a no parking zone both sides from Main Street, Highway 2, right to our back entrance. Then we don't have a problem. It's very simple. The parking, I know of a new development in Colburn right now, condo complex. One of our employees moved in. They have one spot per dwelling, I guess. And there's parking problems. People have more than one car. It's not enough. 1.25. I'll let the planners decide that, but I'm just concerned about parking dumping out onto the street where we're going to need clearance.
So as I read it, 1.25 is the existing
Right.
bylaw, and the developer's contemplating more parking than our minimums. Did I read that correctly, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Warren?
I'm just looking at this through the chair. I'm just looking at the summary of the parking right now. I believe the reduction is in parking was 9 spaces from what is required by the bylaw. And it's probably worth noting too that it's a seniors geared development. So the greater likelihood of people having more than one cars is a lot less than it would be otherwise.
I would
sure.
agree with you,
Yeah.
except for the fact that this is still a rural community. We don't have bus
Sure.
service out there.
Yep.
We don't have people calls, do we have a taxi here? How many taxis do we have?
We don't have one anymore.
No taxi, no. So I think you have to think of that as a long term. And, you know, parking is on everyone's mind, but when you start to put a higher density into a rural area like that, you're gonna have issues with vehicles. And then I guess there's a plan at some point to put a turning lane into Highway 2 into Rundle Lane. So you're gonna eliminate that. You're getting into a very high density.
And honestly, I think we need to look at some sort of control at that intersection
Yeah,
sooner rather than later. I think that
absolutely.
would be
That needs to be moved up.
I would think that when we implement this traffic study we're undertaking over the course of this year, that would be one of the intersections we'd want to put a serious focus on for that consultant, quite frankly.
And furthermore to that, in front of our location, there's been several potentially severe accidents. And it's because of the width and the cupping of the road and the highway. And I want to go on record as it's dangerous right now. And it does get filled in on the curbs, you know, off the pavement side. But in the wintertime, we watch videos of people spinning out all the time. And it's because of the speed. They're still going 80 kilometers an hour. And the pavement itself is not wide enough. So I take that into account as well, as to move up some sort of development on the road widening.
Thanks, Rick. With regard to the no parking on Rundle Lane from Main Street to the rear of Lens RV, is that something we can take a look at through Public Works, Mr. Whiteman?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, Rick?
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. I saw a hand over here go up as well. Go ahead, Mrs. Richardson. Councillor Fredis, we'll get the public to have their say and then we'll open it to council.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I have a question in regards to the 4-story building. I think this came up before. Will our fire truck, can it accommodate if there was a fire on the top floor? Do we have a thingy?
We don't have a ladder. There are 3 ladders accessible to Brighton, one from Trenton, one from Campbellford, one from Coburg. But I believe this, the intent would be to have this fire suppressed inside, Mr. Warren.
What does that mean?
Sprinkler systems.
Oh, okay.
But I guess I'd ask the consultant to chime in on that, or if you know for a fact, Mr. Warren, that's the case.
I can answer on behalf of the client on this. Yes, we are having full sprinkler system in both buildings.
My other question is, I don't know if it's relevant or not, because I'm not sure if I'm clear on, are we not tearing up Main Street and bringing all the infrastructure down all the way to the retirement home?
There is a water main project contemplated, and hopefully that'll happen sooner rather than later. Director Whiteman?
Sooner, not later.
So
What's the impact to Main Street along that route?
It's really resurfacing in many ways with the water main refurbished. That's it.
Thank you.
So is there water mains going up to where this proposal is, or will they be hooking up when we redo all this?
So the water main is there now.
It is?
We're just
Okay.
replacing the water main.
We're replacing
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a 100-year-old cast iron water main there now.
Another 50 years, Brian.
Needs not the section of pipe I took to show the MP. Let me tell you, that
Yeah.
thing is rotten.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I thought I saw another hand. We're okay. Members of council, questions or comments? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. Regarding the proposed no parking zone on Rundle, perhaps it's best to extend it from Main Street all the way down to Cortland, because there is still construction going down in that neck of the woods and phase 3. And I tried to go down there this morning, and it was an interesting experience dodging some of the vehicles. So maybe that's something that we should be considering, is extending that no parking zone that far. Additionally, as we know, there is in the offing some new firefighting equipment, and I don't mean to put words in the chief's mouth, but in my discussions with him, he didn't necessarily think in terms of a ladder truck to achieve 4 floors, but something with extended hose operation or arms that would enable him to reach a 4th floor, as it was a more economical proposition than a full-scale ladder truck. And again, I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but that was my takeaway from that conversation.
And is that, and I'm not going to ask you to put words in the chief's mouth, but he's not here to answer. So this is what happens when you don't show up to a meeting. In that discussion, was that what he was contemplating for the new purchase that was budgeted for?
As I understand it, and then when we did that old fire management plan discussion with the consultant, I was an advocate of that proposition in terms of the equipment, and I believe it was duly noted as well.
So we'll ask the directors to circle back with the chief on that discussion, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, if you don't mind. Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. Pleased to see a mixed use medium density development. That's very exciting. I also wanted to second the comment about some kind of traffic control at that site. I was going to ask about that. Thank you for bringing that up. I have 2 more points. One is that we can't actually say that a given property is for seniors. We can't discriminate based on age. I know that's a common thing in real estate. But I will also clarify that it happens effectively all the time because they basically build homes that no one else can afford. So with that in mind, I guess I wanted some clarification on how this was going to be geared towards seniors. And the other thing is, I was curious about the sustainability features of this new build. Oh, and another point that I should always ask about these is affordability. Is there any chance of any affordable units in this structure? I know you mentioned market rent, but I'd like to hear about affordable units. Thank you.
So 3 questions there, and I don't know if 3 different people need to answer those, but I will look to the developer's agents for comment.
I can definitely answer some of the questions. So on the sustainability, we are going to be doing, we're going for a CMHC grant. And that one, well, sorry, not a grant, but it's a program, and we need to meet energy efficiency. So we are proposing a mechanical system in our building that will target our energy efficiency to be a certain percentage higher than what is required by code. So we're going to be exceeding the code on that. When it comes to sustainability features, so that's what it's going to be based on, kind of those criterias. And I'll leave it to maybe the owners to answer the affordability question on it.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, good evening. I hope everyone can hear me.
We can hear you.
So in terms of affordability, right now, I would say it's too early to share any type of market rates, but I can commit to that. This is targeting a wide cast of the demographic in terms of affordability. So it's certainly not focusing on one segment of the rental market. It's trying to hit as you know, from left to right of the book castings, but I can't say anything more than that. I'd be putting the process before itself. But I appreciate the question, and obviously it's top of mind. Challenging in today's economic environment, obviously, but certainly something that the development team is taking very seriously. So sorry for the political answer, but that's the best I can yield at this point.
Mr. Mizek, while we've got you, perhaps you could speak to how these are being, not how they're being marketed, but in how are these attractive to seniors? I think that was really the question that we were, without discriminating, of course, which we know you wouldn't do, or we certainly hope you wouldn't do. How is this more friendly to a seniors market than to others?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So this is really a successful good news story for the municipality of Brighton and your constituents, council. We've had stronger demand than we expected. We certainly knew that there's demand for affordable housing and I'm going to call seniors housing without discrimination to the Brighton area. And people love Brighton for all the reasons we do. And currently there's been an exodus of Brightonians going to different markets to find housing option at a certain age. And Brighton Retirement Living has exceeded capacity, and constituents in the population are looking for more options. So this project was launched to support that demand. So it's something that we've been excited to be able to react to market on, to be able to fill housing options for the community, because we have the alternative of simply putting some type of commercial platform in this highway commercial location, really kind of one-story commercial solutions that Brighton also needs. But given the demand for the product, we're happy to be able to provide rental housing to the population that's definitely needed. So that's again a political answer. I'm not trying to be cute with my response, but it's early days, and I can't commit to more than the process at this time. But I can just say that there's sufficient demand for this product right now, and we're pleased to be able to provide it to Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Mizek. As a follow-up, Councillor Wielden.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Mizek. I appreciate that answer. And just to follow up for the benefit of the audience, because I heard a little rumble when we talked about too early to put prices on things. When I price a home as a realtor, I put a 1-week deadline on that price, because that's how fast the market can change. Mr. Mizek is looking at 2 years out or more. So it would be inappropriate for him to put too firm of a price on anything at this point, given that how quickly market can change.
Councillor Freitas.
To the chair, thank you. I was delighted to see that the whole design framework ensured accessibility, particularly for units targeted to seniors. I guess I can safely presume that the 4-story unit, Mr. Mizek, will have an elevator. It's probably mandated by code. But my question is, would you consider an elevator for the 3-story unit? Again, because you're targeting seniors, and because there are a limited number of units in the 4-story section, some of them might be forced by circumstance to seek shelter in the 3-story, and they may have some accessibility concerns or problems. I know that'll probably add a bit to your cost, but would you consider that?
I'm happy to respond to that question. Actually, our 3-story mixed-use building will have a double elevator cab in it. We do need it we're going to be meeting CSA accessibility standards. So the idea is that they can basically go on every single floor. And then we are also having a single cab elevator for building A.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm very excited about the rental aspect of what you're doing, as well as the commercial aspect of what you're doing with these 2 buildings. The intersection that was brought up earlier, that was foremost on my mind too, because we talked about another regress or egress to phase 4 of the other development across the road, down the road. So perhaps you can think about that a little bit more with this, with that intersection. Isn't this the time that we might be talking about who's going to be responsible, and how that intersection will be monitored with either traffic lights or some form of control? So is it something that we should be talking about now? Maybe Paul can answer that question.
Director Walsh.
Through the mayor to council, there is a condition of draft approval for the Applewood subdivision, so we'll be dealing with that later in the agenda, the phase 3 of Applewood. There is conditions in that draft approval for phases 3 and 4 that there be the intersection improvement. That was planned right from the time of the approval of Brighton Retirement Living development. So there'll be a left lane turning onto Rundle. So there will be some major intersection improvements. So I think some of the comments earlier from Rick's RV representative that will be making those improvements. So together with the idea of no parking along Rundle, we'll take all those options into assessment at the time of design and conclude what the best arrangement might be.
As a follow-up,
And one thing in similar area, as far as accessibility goes, I don't note any sidewalk along Main Street in front of the two properties, the apartments or the retirement home. I thought at one time that was a part of the discussion of the site plan or at some point way back. I don't see it on the renderings. Can you explain that?
Director?
The observation is accurate. And I'd have to go back in the draft conditions to recall whether we had a sidewalk. I think we did have a sidewalk provision in that draft approval. And so folks might be aware that sidewalks along Main Street, they end at the Orchard Gate. I don't think they go past, west past Orchard Gate. And being such a busy segment of highway, it's sidewalks are going to be important, especially to get them connected to the Main Street. And so it is our objective to get some sidewalks in there. And at the time of site plan control, so we'll have further approval of this site after the zone amendment is done, a site plan agreement. And we'll be looking at a cash contribution to sidewalks at that time.
Good, because I think that'll be a priority. Can I answer that? I think it'll be a priority for the accessibility of walkers. If they're going to have less cars, they may decide to want to walk downtown. I understand the retirement home will also have transportation for their folks. And I imagine, I'm just going to guess that the people that rent these facilities will also have use or access to apply to go on the, they have a bus that I think they've purchased it already. So rumor has it. Yeah, and that'll be a real plus for that entire village, as I hear that they're calling it. So
thank you both. Councillor Wright?
Excuse me, just wondering if anybody could speak to whether or not the retail spaces have any services or retail that are already kind of hooked into this and that you can say are coming.
I think I'll flip that one over to Mr. Misek.
I'm gonna be political again. Yes, there's intended tenants there, but there's individual businesses that I have to be mindful of, so I can't identify them at this time, but I can say that it's gonna be complementary to the residential units, both at Brighton Retirement Living and the subject apartments. So you're talking about some type of pharmacare. There might be some type of doctor care, and then specialists in the doctor space. I'll just kind of leave it at that high level for now, if that's okay.
Thank you.
I think it gets us where we need to go for the answer to the question. Anything else from members of council? I will turn it back over to the members of the public. If you could please approach the microphone. And there's a sheet there also for you to complete your name. And do you need any other just name? Just first name and last name on the sheet. The sheet disappeared. Did Rick from Lens RV steal it?
It's just a quick question.
He thought it was a parting gift. It's okay. We'll get the man a pen or something.
My question is, you're going to have doctor's offices and pharmacies, and how many parking spaces is it going to be? Is there going to be enough for people to come and go? You got apartment buildings and you're going to want people that are going to want to come in and visit. Is there going to be extra parking for that?
So
again, it's parking.
The presentation from the planner, Ms. Ferguson Althouse, noted that all the parking on the west side of the 3-story building was contemplated for the commercial. I don't know how many spots. Ruth,
Because if you got a doctor's office, you're
Yeah.
gonna have a lot of people parking, and if you got pharmacies coming, like it,
Yeah,
is it gonna be enough?
You raise a fair question. Ruth, do you know how many parking spots are on that west side?
Yes, there's 55 residential parking spaces, 62 commercial spaces,
62 commercial spaces?
total of 117.
Thank you.
And how many for visitors?
Well, that's aggregated. The parking requires 1.25 or 52 spaces for residential, so with the 41 units, they have slightly more. Overall at 55, and then with respect to the commercial spaces, as referenced in the presentation, they're slightly short on that of 7 spaces, but there's 62 spaces for the overall first floor area.
And how many of them are gonna be handicapped?
How many of those will be accessible parking spots? I don't know what that requirement is. Director, do you?
I don't know offhand, it's specified in the Ontario regulations for that, but they were shown on that site plan. There's a symbolism for that.
So the plan will be have enough accessible parking spots that are
To meet the regulations.
AODA regulation.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
5. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from council? Oh, Rick wants another.
Second chance.
Sure, why not? It's a statutory public meeting. We try not to cut anybody off.
I just had a second thought here about bike lanes along Main Street from Rundle into town. You're developing a lot, you've got phase 3, I guess, behind us. There's a lot of housing in there. You've got multiple dwellings going up beside us. And the bike traffic is going to go up. If you don't want people riding on sidewalks, you need to provide. I live in Peterborough, and they've got a great downtown for bike lanes. And it's respected, and it's something to think about in this town. Because there's a lot of e-bikes coming on the market.
I think you raise a really good point.
It's something to think about on the planning side.
Yeah.
And
well,
when you're developing the street, the turn lanes and all that, it's you're putting high density now. And,
Yeah.
That's I see it growing in that direction.
Yeah.
I haven't just bought an e-bike myself.
Thanks, Rick.
And they're a lot of fun, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Director Whiteman will keep that top of mind when the reconstruction of Main Street comes up, I'm sure. But I think that should be something we keep top of mind when we go to reconstruct any, especially our downtown core streets. Anyone else, council or the public? I have a few questions. Water and wastewater capacity. Can anyone speak to me about that? Are we going to be well in compliance when this development rolls out?
To the mayor, to council, yes, we will be in compliance. We have about 10 years capacity, notwithstanding recent approvals. So we're pretty good that way. And staff will be bringing forward more about that at another council session.
And while we're on water modeling and pressure, because these buildings will have fire suppression inside, we want to make sure there's enough pressure should the unthinkable happen. And I just want council's assurance to council that there's enough water pressure with the existing water main to manage this for fire suppression purposes.
Director Whiteman might have another comment as well, but we do require functional servicing report to address those issues. And I think part of the urgency of the applicant for the timing of this coming forward is to coincide with the improvement of the water main. So I expect occupancy won't happen until the water main is operational. But that might be a special provision in the site plan agreement too.
Understood. Thank you. Director Whiteman, anything to add?
No.
Thank you. And I just note that the original proposal or what the concept plan was just a block of commercial here. So to add 41 additional residential units in a community that needs this kind of residential space, kudos on the developer for thinking about it. Obviously, they have their own reasons for doing so, but also for staff for for giving the thought some serious consideration and bringing it forward to council. It's appreciated. I do want to say that our normal process, or that what has become our normal process for statutory public meeting, is for us to receive comments and for staff to take it away and then bring back a report. Tonight, we're seeing a report in front of us, and I just want to make sure that we're not missing anything. We're not rushing a process as we've been told we have in the past. And I wonder if we could just have a comment around why we're seeing the report in tonight's statutory public meeting.
Through the chair, yeah, you're correct. It is very often a two-stage approach. One of the reasons we're satisfied with going forward with the second stage this evening is because we have a further stage approach through the site plan process, which is already delegated to staff. The details of tonight's meeting are really just to make sure that those provisions under the zoning bylaw, which are requested to be changed in order to implement the proposal, can still happen. Some of those other details, including an agreement with the municipality, will happen further down the road still, even with this decision tonight.
Thank you. Good information. Last chance for questions or comments from either the public or members of council before we move on. Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, just to clarify what I think I heard. The site plan process allows for residents to continue to input.
No, the site plan process has now been delegated to staff under provincial requirement.
Okay, I understand that part, but are residents then able to dialogue with staff in the site plan process?
Site plan process is not a public process. There certainly can be dialogue, but there is no requirement under the Planning Act right now for public process in the site plan process.
So staff would welcome conversation with the public, but will not be going to the public with any further, once council makes a decision, with any further site plan issues on this application. Follow up?
To the chair, yeah, that's the assurance I was looking for, that there were open ears. So if there were some other concerns that they could be raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. And this question might be more or less for phase 3, although I'm going to ask it now because we're working them both kind of together. I really like the proposal. Looking at the initial parcel of subject lands, there's only some limited landscaping and buffering. I believe in phase 3, there is a lack of green space as well. And I'm wondering if there's opportunities somewhere between the areas south of the subject lands or in phase 3, if we could kind of create a little bit more green space or park space.
Mr. Warren, Director Walsh, care to tackle that one?
To the mayor, the council, to mayor, in the decision for the draft approval for phases 3 and 4 for Applewood, there was a requirement of 5% park block, and they actually specified the location, which would be the westerly extension of Brayburn from Rundle, so it'll be that corner. And I'll make a side note here that was never discussed at the time because we hadn't received or completed our master parks and recreation plan as yet. But the master park and recreation plan actually asked for a larger block than what the 5% would permit us to have. So we've maxed out on what we can ask for. It'll be up to us then to go back to the proponent and see if we can't purchase additional lands to expand that block. For the areas immediately adjacent to phase 3, there's an open space block on the south. It's got a stormwater management pond in it, so it has a limited capacity for a full spectrum of recreational activities, but it does offer some open space opportunities. And at some point, it will be programmed as such, but it is zoned open space.
Follow up?
Yes, follow-up comment. Seeing how the proponent is still listening, wondering if there's opportunity at some point to compromise and maybe give us a little extra park space, Jeff. Thank you.
Not sure it's a compromise when we're asking for something, but I like your word. Mr. Mysak, Mr. Dunnigan, do you have any comment there?
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that, Councillor Riley. So thanks for the question. So the subject site will have, it will actually have significant landscaping. I'm not going to share budgets, but it will floor you. And as part of the feedback with the municipality, they did an urban design peer review, and it provided direct feedback on how to enhance the landscape features between Brighton Retirement Living and the subject site. Specifically between the property lines, there's going to be a significant amount of park space there to allow for a hub for the residents to meet. So if I'm clear, it's between Brighton Retirement Living and the subject site before council. Mr. Director Walsh mentioned about the parkland opposite Brayburn on the west side of Rundle. We've close to the subject site. Sorry, I'm having computer problems here. And so that's designed to make sure that residents of the subject property have a safe access to it. We don't want to have a park too far away from the subject site, but it is going to complement the park space for Brighton Retirement Living and the subject site. And then just to bolt on to what Director Walsh said, south of phase 3, yes, there's a stormwater pond, but there is 12 acres that this development company deeded to the municipality of Brighton, and it is a work in progress right now as part of phase 2A and 2B, the subdivision agreement. So you won't see that being built out right now because we're still in the process of developing out that site, but certainly in the near future, that is something that we presented to staff, potentially council in previous applications before council about a detailed walking system that connects to the Butler Creek corridor system. It would have tot lots, playgrounds, benches to meet all different forms of all different members of society from all age brackets. So it's going to have a park system as well as benches to cater for accessibility and things like that. There is a multi-use trail that is going down the west side of Rundle Lane that connects to it. So we've thought about all this. We're happy to continue the dialogue, of course. Our feedback is part of the process, but certainly your feedback is. And that's what I can speak to right now.
Follow up?
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that you're at least keeping it top of mind, and I guess we look forward to seeing it all completed.
Thank you both. I saw a hand go up in the back here.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I just want
We could just state your name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We didn't do that last time.
Conrad Osner.
Thank you, Conrad.
Regarding the parking. If there are so many parking spots for the commercial end and then the residential end, there's no parking on Rundle. What about guests? If the residents have guests, where are they going to park? In the wintertime, they won't be allowed on Rundle. And in the wintertime, you can't park overnight on the street. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be having to go to a location further away and walk to see their grandmother or their parents or something like that?
Perhaps I'll ask Ruth to comment on guest parking. And Conrad, I'm going to have to ask you to turn the microphone over, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. When the zoning bylaw is set out, there's a provision for apartment uses where there's 0.25 parking space required per unit. So overall, as I think I summarized, there's parking for the apartment uses that the Brighton bylaw would require for the 41 apartments of 51 1/4 or 52 spaces, and 55 are being provided on site. so that each apartment would be allocated a parking space. And perhaps either Jeff or Chris can speak to this, although it is still quite early in terms of how they manage that parking for each apartment unit. But then there is factored in within the residential parking area, an allocation for visitor parking. So that is how it is set out. Now, it is a mixed use site, and as well, there is the 66 spaces for the commercial use. So those commercial uses in the evenings and perhaps on the weekends will not be used at all or very minimally. So at that time, when you might get visitors more commonly visiting someone in the apartment, then those spaces would then become available for that surplus should it be required. So that's essentially how it's managed through the zoning process and those standards. And you're seeing more and more in planning that they're trying to reduce the parking demands to try and provide for more intensification and for more affordable housing. So municipalities are actually being asked to try and minimize their parking standards. But I would say Brighton's standard of 1.25 units, it's very common across southeastern Ontario as the standard parking requirement for apartment uses.
Thank you for that. I'm fond of saying that in the 80s, as I grew up, we used to drive from the Bank of Commerce to the Royal Bank, which, as everyone knows, is kitty corner to one another. We don't do that as much anymore. So hopefully we are getting away from our car-centric society. It's not going to happen overnight. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Members of council? Mr. Warren, any final comments?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Is council prepared to make a decision this evening? Motion before me is moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the report of the Planning and Development Department dated May 8th, 2023, regarding zoning bylaw amendment Z01 2023 be received, and further that council enacts a bylaw to rezone the subject lands as described as part of lots 1 and 2 of Registered Plan 28, parts 1 and 2 of Plan 39R 13950 as provided as attachment number 4 to this report. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council move out of the statutory public meeting, May 8th, 2023 at 7:33 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to planning and development reports. Our first report is with regard to Applewood Subdivision registration of Phase 3. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Nothing much for merit other than there are some cross references in the agreement that could be improved upon and some typos, and we're just asking that the mayor and the recommendations that they receive, that they direct staff to make some of those revisions as may be necessary.
So if it says council receive and direct staff to amend the report, is that fair? Deputy Mayor, you're the mover of that. Are you okay adding and direct staff to amend to this motion? Deputy Mayor Anderson, thank you. Councillor Fredis is the seconder. Motion before me is moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council receives and directs staff to amend the staff report dated May 8th regarding the municipality entering into a subdivision agreement for Applewood Subdivision Phase 3. That council give final approval to the draft subdivision M plan for Phase 3 of Applewood Subdivision, comprised of 13 single detached lots, 4 semi-detached units, 18 townhouse units, for a total of 35 residential units, together with blocks for reserves and required easements under authority of Section 51, Sub 58 of the Planning Act, and that finally approved M plan be registered within 30 days of the date of approval. And that the bylaw be enacted to authorize a subdivision agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton and the owner 8597685 Canada Incorporated for the Phase 3 Applewood subdivision. And that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to sign the subdivision agreement. And that staff be directed to make any necessary infrastructure design drawing revisions as may be necessary to be in keeping with good engineering practices. And the council authorize the municipal solicitor to include any legal descriptions or other revisions as required for registration and to register the final approved subdivision M plan for subdivision agreement. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Schedule L, which is construction controls. We've had recent requests for construction controls that include maintaining a clear roadway, as another neighborhood that's under construction in town can't actually get its garbage picked up because of construction vehicles in the roadway. I'm wondering if that can be added to Schedule L.
Director?
Yes, I think we can find some language to that effect.
Thank you. Anything further for members of council? Deputy Mayor?
Jeff mentioned about the waste. I understand. I saw about over 100 containers sitting at the road there the other day. Blue boxes, etc. Is the recycling won't go past that intersection or the corner there because it's not assumed yet, or what is?
No, it doesn't require assumption. It just needs the assessment of the collection contractor. So GFL does from time to time look at new subdivisions and determine whether they can get their trucks down there safely. If they can, they let the county know that it will happen, and they give the county a timeline so that the county can communicate with the residents when that will happen. But until GFL is entirely comfortable as the actual, people with the liability insurance of driving down those roads, the collection won't happen.
It's really unfortunate for it's like they're blowing all over the road. I don't know. It's just, it seems beyond me that in this day and age, somebody can't sort that out.
Well, we can sort it out. It just means we need to keep.
I think the recycling
constantly
if
clear.
County or whoever, it's not us, it's the county, I believe.
It's the contractor. It's the
contractor and the
contractor
county,
that
yeah.
picks up the counties on behalf of.
Well,
the
I
county,
just thought
yes.
I'd mention it because it is it goes to what you're talking about as well. So
Let's be clear. People are paying taxes and they're not getting the services that they're paying for. That's the reality.
thank you very much.
And so we do encourage GFL, the county does encourage GFL to be in constant motion, assessing these things. The subdivision that Councillor Wheeldon alluded to, they're just not able to get the trucks down there. And until it's safe to do so for the residents and the drivers, the GFL is just not going to let that truck go down there. So same in this subdivision. When things are clear and ready to go, GFL is prepared to do it. It does, and it's nothing to do with assumption, nothing at all.
Okay.
Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. First off, to Director Walsh, on Schedule L, I noticed under item 10 that the municipality now finally has a dust mitigation protocol. My compliments to you and your team for establishing it and incorporating it in development agreements, and I hope it's there in everyone going forward. I think it's long overdue. I can tell you from experience, having driven down Rundle and across part of Cortland this morning, my clean car needed a wash again. So hopefully this protocol can be implemented quickly to improve living conditions for the residents in the neighborhood, because I'm sure it's not pleasant having to inhale all that particulate matter. Secondly, if the chair will indulge me, I have just a couple of other questions. There was a meeting last September where the residents of Phase 2 appeared before council to express their complaints and concerns about deficiencies such as sidewalks not being completed, driveways not paved, lawns not completed. And there were 4 houses on Brayburn which had driveways that were unable to hold a vehicle. It was indicated at the time that these deficiencies would be corrected before any further development agreements would be approved. Have all of these deficiencies now been completed.
Director Walsh, Director Whitman.
For you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they have been completed and yes, done. We have to make sort of some revisions, but everything has been sorted out.
Okay. And a follow-up, if I may, to the chair. At the meeting last August, when the draft plan and the chair had started to refer to wastewater capacity earlier, I just wanted to build on that a bit. At the meeting last August, when the draft plan for 558 homes was approved, it was stated in the planning report at the time that there was a 10-year residual capacity in the wastewater system. And if that build out had occurred immediately, there would be no residual capacity left. So to control this, it was indicated that residual capacity would only be allocated at the time of execution of a subdivision agreement. Now, since then, a number of other developments have been approved, including phase 3. Now these senior apartments, Butler Creek, readily come to mind, and they would in total seem to represent almost half of the 558 homes, which suggests that we're kind of out of capacity. So my question is, are there plans in place to address the pending capacity shortfall? Are there any indications of the cost and the timing to implement these infrastructure upgrades to increase capacity so that we can then proceed on some of the other developments that have recently been approved by this council, such as I believe it's called Brighton Meadows, that Ontario Street development, and of course the balance of this original draft plan of approval.
Director Walsh.
To the mayor and council, so I'll do a part A response, and I'll need the assistance of Director Whitman after that. But I think it's been my approach in recent years to bring developments to the stage of draft approval. And at that stage, then things can stop. But at that point, at least we have developers at the table willing to participate in the front-end costing of major improvements to our systems. And so I think what we'll see come forward is, although we've been doing it ad hoc on a per development basis, the need to have a provision in the draft approvals that residual sanitary capacity is not being allocated until the time of subdivision agreement or site plan and control agreement, whichever the case may be. I think maybe we need to formalize that through an overarching policy and make it part of our pre-consultation process, for example, and make sure that they are very aware of that, and also make some provisions for probably some pre-development financial agreements as well. This is not uncommon, but I think it's something we need to do and get to that point. So currently we're at about our design capacity of 4,600 cubes per day. And so we're still well below that. And so I know we're working on some improvements to our system that we expect to see some increased capacity, volumetrically speaking. I know there are some quality parameters that we also have to address, but it's a different issue. But Director Whitman has a better handle on the environmental services and engineering component, of course.
Director Whitman.
Yes. We have an RFP out at the moment for the upgrade of the wastewater treatment facility, which we hope will.
Leslie, could you draw the microphone closer to you, please?
That's all right. We have an RFP out at the moment, which closes this week, for the upgrade of the wastewater treatment facility. We've gone through the RFP process, our BA process. So it should increase our capacity. As Paul has mentioned, there are some concerns with quality issues, as we've had for some time. We have been addressing those issues as well. Past year, those ammonia exceedances, I think, have been quite well managed. So it will evolve as we go along with the upgrade. And we eventually will have to do another EA possibly in terms of when we reach an 80% trigger capacity, which we haven't reached yet, but will, of course, in the future.
Good. You have another one? I've got two more hands up, so I'll come back to you. Councillor Wright. Councillor Rowley.
No, let Councillor Ferreira speak.
Councillor
He asked
Ferreras.
my first question, so I'm good.
Back to you, Byron.
To the chair, thank you, and I apologize, Councillor Rowley, for stealing your thunder. I'm delighted to hear, Director, that you're looking at some sort of higher policy initiative that would tend to map out our growth and needs in wastewater. I'm also particularly enthused about what I perceive as your suggestion that perhaps some participation above and beyond the ratepayers and taxpayers to address this shortcoming. I wholeheartedly applaud that, and I'd be glad to make a motion to that extent if it's required. And with that, I will yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from members of council? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next report is with regard to Butler Creek subdivision and condo subdivision agreement and registration. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
To Mayor, to council, no, nothing further to add other than maybe we can use that same revision to the motion. For this one, we're working with a new template of subdivision agreement, so that I apologize for the some of the hiccups in the actual language of the agreement.
Councillor Wielden, as the mover, are you okay adding the words and direct staff to amend?
Yes, I am.
As the seconder, Councillor Rowley? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wielden. Thank you, Director Walsh. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wielden, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council receives and directs staff to amend the staff report dated May 8th, 2023 regarding the municipality entering into a subdivision agreement for Butler Creek subdivision and condo subdivision agreement and registration, and that council give final approval to the draft subdivision M plan for Butler Creek subdivision and condo, comprised of 9 single detached dwelling residential lots, 16 semi-detached residential lots, and 21 fourplexes in a condominium block for a total of 109 residential units and a street extension together with the blocks for parkland and reserves, and that the finally approved M plan be registered within 30 days of the date of approval, and that the bylaw be enacted to authorize a subdivision agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton and the owner 2020910 Ontario Limited for the Butler Creek subdivision and condominium, and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to sign the subdivision agreement, and that staff be directed to make any necessary final design drawings revisions as may be necessary to be in keeping with good engineering practices, and the council authorize the municipal solicitor to include any legal descriptions or other revisions as required for registration, and to register the final approved subdivision M plan, reference plans, and subdivision agreement. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Ferreras.
To the chair, thank you. If you'll indulge me, I have 5 or 6 questions I would like to raise. First off, currently there's a temporary drainage basin in Butler Creek to mitigate the water issues that affected the adjacent neighbors and they had bad experience over the past few months. So the question is, will this be removed, and if so, when? And is the site now properly serviced and graded to ensure that the water problems will not reoccur?
Director Whiteman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's temporary. That pond, with the signing of the service agreement, I believe the contractor will be on site soon and would put in asphalt and curbing. So most of any stormwater issues would have been addressed above and beyond any construction that takes place for the housing, lot grading, so on that. Can't estimate when that would be. But generally speaking, I think most of the stormwater issues have been addressed.
Thank you. Councillor Ferreras.
Director Walsh, you were kind enough to provide, and Mr. Warren were kind enough to provide the residents on the north of Piers and Nautical with some pictures of the proposed quads. And allowed them to convey their concerns with the color consistency with the existing neighborhood. Do you have any feel for when the residents might hear from the developer? And if he might be amenable to the residents' concerns regarding color consistency, recognizing the limitations of site plan stuff.
Director Walsh.
The mayor to council, sure, you make good reference to the fact that through the Planning Act, we really aren't there with the capacity to regulate color. And we may have done that a little bit through heritage standards under this different piece of legislation. We may have been able to do that at one point through some other venues, but now with Bill 109 and Bill 23 that amended the Planning Act fairly recently, as December of last year, it's very clear that planning authorities have no business in regulating those exterior materials of color. So, but what we can do perhaps is approach Mr. Al LeBlanc. He's a very amenable individual. To my experience, we can have those discussions. I thought the elevation drawings looked quite attractive myself, but I guess that's in the eye of the beholder, and we're going to have as many opinions around the circle as there are individuals. So I'm not sure how far that can be advanced or what would be achieved at the end of the day, but showed white buildings, and I know that white is now a kind of an in thing for a lot of new homes. One prominent builder in doing his new very large beautiful home all in white, for example. But we can I can talk to the proponent of this development and see if there are other ideas there.
That would be appreciated if you could at least perhaps initiate a discussion, recognizing that there are limitations on what you can do. Again, I note in this agreement that under that Schedule L, item 10, dust mitigation measures are part of the subdivision agreement, and it's a very positive mood. Recognizing the sandy soil conditions and with hot, dry weather hopefully coming, and the usually strong winds here in Brighton, the question that I have is one of the enforcement measures laid out in the protocol. Who will handle this, and what will the frequency of oversight be to ensure the developer is in compliance with the dust mitigation protocol and disruption to the neighbors is minimized?
Director Walsh.
Through the mayor. So enforcement of provisions of the agreement are largely through securities. So if it's part of the construction regulations, then there's always the option of withholding securities until those remedies are made, or using them to bring about the works that are required to control the offending offsite emissions, being in this example dust. There would be other controls through the dust management standards themselves, such as mud mats and street sweeping and that sort of thing. That would also be proactive measures in dust control. And I think Director Whiteman has some experience in dealing with some dust measures as well.
Director Whiteman.
I'm glad you think so, Paul, but anyways. I think really we could make some suggestions, as we have, to the developer with regard to the stormwater issues. We would do likewise with respect to the dust. Friday, for instance, they should keep things clean, let's say, and maybe another day we can consider midweek. We can monitor it, and we can keep a tab on the developer, or contractor, so to see that things are done accordingly. I think we have done so, and we can continue that.
Thank you both. Councillor Fredis.
Thank you to both directors. I think the oversight that you performed in the water problem that we had was exceptional. I know Director Whiteman, you were there almost daily for 2 weeks. I wouldn't expect you necessarily to be there daily inspecting for dust mitigation protocol adherence, but hopefully you have some staff that perhaps could visit the site once or twice a week and remind some folks that the street sweeper needs to go down and some fencing needs to be reestablished, and the main arterial roads need to be cleaned, and some of the other things that are inherent in these protocols. I think that would be greatly appreciated by all. During the Gosport discussions, a gentleman with experience in geotechnical engineering gave a very powerful presentation of the impact and damage of vibrations from heavy vehicle and construction equipment on both infrastructure and surrounding homes, both actual and perceived. While incorporating I note in the Applewoods things, you have a noise protocol. But I wonder if it might not be appropriate, in addition to trying to mirror that noise protocol for Butler Creek, you can incorporate for the residents in both developments a vibration protocol to alleviate any concerns that they will have as a result of stress over cracks in foundations, swimming pool walls, cracks in walls, valuable china falling off display cases, and that sort of stuff. Is there anything that you're aware of or you can contemplate in terms of a vibration protocol in light of that presentation that you might be able to attach to these developments, again, to make life a little easier for existing residents?
Director Walsh. Student Mayor to Council. So things like noise standards, you make reference to noise standards. So there is a provision there for the Applewood Phase 3 because of its proximity to the railway. And so they were required to submit a noise study, and there's some conclusions of that referenced in the subdivision agreement that construction would have to adhere to those standards as dictated by CN. In this case, dealing with vibration, it's not common that there's a vibration provision in most subdivision agreements. It's other than blasting. Of course, with blasting, there's obviously vibration, and we do have a no blasting provision in this agreement. For the street, Meadow Creek Drive, as it's moving from Cedar to the westerly lands, it's about 100 feet north of the nearest houses in there. So that's where the most vibration would occur as they're working on the roadway bed. So I anticipate not having a major interference between that activity 100 feet away, that extensiveness of a vibration affecting buildings, in that vicinity. I'm not an expert, but I will confer with MOE and see the Ministry of Environment and see what standards they may have, like they do have for standards for land use compatibility in general. And there are provisions in the Environmental Protection Act about a contaminant being anything that's an offensive off-site fugitive emission, and there's a long list of things, one of which is vibration. So I suspect MOE will have some standards perhaps, and through the course of this discussion and the recommendation as revised to follow up with some of these points, then if we can find something from the Ministry of Environment, then we'll incorporate that into the agreement. Otherwise, it may be more of a matter of calling Ministry of Environment with a complaint and having them attend to the site and deal with the vibration issue. I also suspect that persons who are operating this type of machinery, like some other machinery, they may be through their training taught when to use their equipment appropriately and how to minimize any off-site adverse effects. But I will learn more about that as a result of this discussion.
Thank you both.
To the director, I'd appreciate, yes, if you could look at those vibration protocols from the ministry to see if there's something that we might as a municipality adopt. if for no other reason than to safeguard the municipal interest in things. What I can tell you from personal experience was when they enlarged Harbor Point Pond, the size of the tracked vehicles that were running up and down Beacon Street, rattling the foundation of my house, was staggering. Now, I don't necessarily anticipate the same sort of equipment in Butler Creek, but you never know. I do know that from Hamilton Woods, there's some heavy equipment that runs from the end of Beacon and Lawrence all the way down around to Lance. And why it doesn't cross through the dirt field in phase 4 is beyond me, but it does cause some vibrational issues. So I think as development progresses in municipality, we need to be perhaps looking at a vibration protocol, one, to safeguard our infrastructure, two, to minimize upset with the municipality and safeguard municipal interests, and thirdly, out of respect for the residents. And my final point, Chair, you'll be delighted to hear. The last question that comes up concerns the extension of Piers and Nautical into the Butler Creek development. At the moment, both of those roads have turnarounds at the end of the streets. And one envisions that with the extension that's laid out, these roads will be connected in some fashion, which will mean extending curbing and the roads themselves into the new development. So the question that comes up is who will be responsible for this, and when might it occur? Because in looking at some of the properties, one can anticipate that there is going to be some great issues relative to driveways and lawns that will need to be addressed. And one can see it being a fairly significant and costly venture. So the question that comes up is who will do it, when will it be done, and who pays for it?
Director Walsh.
To the mayor, to the mayor to council. Yeah, there's the design drawings in the subdivision agreement show that those areas being restored. Yeah, it's in the design drawings, so it'll be incorporated into the subdivision agreement. Currently, we own those extra blocks that were put there to widen and make sufficient space for turnaround. But as you say, that those areas are intended to be restored, i.e. the land's conveyed back to the abutting owner, and the works designed for a through street. So that's in the design drawings for the subdivision agreement. Yeah, so it is an offsite work, and so the final cost of work schedule will need to be revised to reflect that.
Thank you both. Anyone else? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few questions, if I may.
Well, I would think so.
With regard to affordability, as usual, in some other recently approved developments, there's been a rule applied of 10% of units having basement suites. I didn't see mention of that in this one. Is that because there's already medium density in this overall project?
Director Walsh. To the mayor's council, yes, that's the reason why the fourplexes are representing affordable housing. I've conferred with the county affordable housing manager, and they've indicated that appears to them to fall within their current metrics of affordability. The fourplexes, and there's 84 of those. And then on the south side of Meadow Creek Drive, there are some semis and conventional single detached. They would probably not meet those same standards, of course, but and those are the row of homes that would butt onto the terminations of Pier Nautical. But north of Meadow Creek would be a nice contribution of affordability to the community.
Thank you. Also, an avid resident has submitted some photos of trees that were cut down alongside the creek. I understood that the creek was in an EP zone and that development was not occurring there. Can you comment on why the trees are down?
Director Walsh.
I must admit, I'm not aware of the trees coming down. There are provisions in the agreement that that are about how parkland blocks are to be managed before they're conveyed to the municipality. And I have to thank our Director of Parks and Recreation, Mr. Jim Miller, through the study for the Master Park and Recs plan, plus together with a parkland construction manual that's intended for this very instances, that gives some direction to developers and what they should or should not be doing within the parkland blocks before they're conveyed. So some of the language from that master plan and the construction manual rather for parkland has been put into this development agreement. And so we'll benefit from that.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. One more, regarding sidewalks and crosswalk. The report says crosswalk over Cedar Street. Does that imply an overpass or does it just mean across Cedar Street?
Director Walsh.
The latter.
Okay, that's what I thought. I did want to ask about sidewalks along there though, because the sidewalk along Cedar is unique, which is one way of putting it. And in some cases, north of the bridge on Cedar Street there, over Butler Creek, it is a very narrow bike lane that I'm not sure you could even call a bike lane. How much sidewalk can we get on Cedar Street?
Director Walsh. Through the mayor, we did ask for widening of Cedar Street. So it's a fairly conventional standard. So there will be widening of the road allowance that allow for sidewalks. And when this first started, staff did really wrestle where the best place for a sidewalk on the westerly side of Cedar. And so for all the reasons that you've stated, plus utility poles in the way and things like that, and trying to connect to other things. So, you know, I think in the final assessment, we said we better take the longest view possible on this. And when Cedar gets reconstructed, do something when things are being moved anyway. But the provisions of the subdivision decision, the draft conditions and the agreement do allow for both the crosswalk and the sidewalk and the parkland block that will also have a trail within it, and that will connect to the kind of the landing area for the existing trail right at Cedar with a bit of a parking space. So this will give us an opportunity to extend that existing trail from the east side of Cedar to the west. And there's a bit of not a formal plan, but something that's been thought out a bit in having that trail move along Butler Creek and come out somewhere along Butler Street.
Thank you both. Deputy Mayor.
Just to pick up on that, Jeff, the sidewalk along there, we talked about that way back as well. That is going to be the responsibility of the developer, correct?
Director?
There is a contribution to sidewalks there, yes. I don't think I'd have to go back to the draft approval conditions to see what extent. I think it's, don't think there's a requirement for the full sidewalk. I think it was a cash contribution, similar to how we managed the crosswalk.
It was brought up anyhow, and I thought it was something that was going to be taken care of, part of that site plan and everything. Excuse me. And the other, I have another question, if you don't mind. The stormwater, it was also stated that half the water would go to the north or go to Butler Creek, and the other half would go to the stormwater drainage and ponds. Is there assurance of that being done before we get into it, as far as about that drainage? Because with the storms we've had, and in those last, the 2 big years where we had the big storms, the creek was full. I'm concerned about that creek as well as other people are. I wasn't getting excited about it, but the way things are going and it being dammed up with trees and blocked this past spring with damming and everything going on, I think it's something we need to turn our eye to a little more. And maybe with the developer cutting trees down or whatever, maybe there's time to, I don't like to use the word dredge, but maybe there's a way of cleaning up this creek and where it can flow better and handle more capacity, because I think the capacity is coming based on everything we know about climate change. So right now, the creek is not in good shape as far as, we might have removed some trees and some blockage, but I'd be concerned. So with all half of the water going to the creek and the other half going to the stormwater pond, which I won't worry, that's something that you're dealing with. What do you feel about your concern, other concerns that we should have with that creek and that bridge and Cedar Street?
Let's just tackle the question about how much stormwater is going where.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. To the council, through the mayor, that's correct. The stormwater management has been designed to have up to, I think, 1 in 5 year storm event go through this existing storm drains to the south through Nautical and Pier. At which point, though, that they would be not able to carry more than a certain storm event. And don't quote me on the 1 to 5, but it's limited there. So the way the design is such that when it hits that limit, the water is then directed to the north towards the creek. And the creek being free flowing, it can handle a lot of volume. So it'll go through these little cleaning mechanisms called OGS or oil grit separators that MOE, certain manufacturers of will recognize that they do the job. And so that has, it'll enter the creek and it'll be clean water entering the creek to level 1 quality. I think the flooding might be determined through the bridge sizing. It might need to see at some point increase in the girth of the bridge to address the flooding. I think that might be the determinant there. But yes, we did have some flooding issues on the east side of Cedar this spring, and our equipment was able to get in there to remove some trees that had fallen and causing or assisting with the flooding conditions. Equipment couldn't get in because they would have sunk, and so we had to make sure it receded enough before we could get the trees out of there. So that's a bit of the background.
Just have a follow-up.
Yes, just regarding cleaning up the creek. I always thought it was something that the conservation authorities or Lower Trent or somebody had some responsibility for. Is it totally our responsibility?
The conservation area prefers things to be left naturalized. So it is our responsibility if we want to go in and clean up the creek, and we need their permission to do it. We need to fill out all the appropriate forms and pay all the appropriate licenses, and then we can go clean up our creek.
Just to move a tree.
Just to move a tree, just like everybody else.
So we got to count on beavers. Okay.
Well, I think in some cases the beavers are causing the problems.
I know that. I know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Concerns.
Anyone else? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. One final question, if I may. I just wanted to go back around and talk about the widening of Cedar Street. If I understood you correctly, the allowances are now essentially there to allow for the future widening. It's just a question of funding, I presume, to do that widening of Cedar. Do we have any idea of how far downstream that might be? Because it's certainly a road that could use that upgrade, including a sidewalk. I'm terrified every time I go down there and see all the little kiddies out there playing on what we jokingly call a sidewalk. It's unsafe for them. So hopefully we can do that sooner than later. But if you could give me some commentary on timing, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I think maybe we should park that, only because I think it would be best for us to have a more global sense of the roadway system in the community of who's going next, rather than just giving a one-off of Cedar Street. Just because then the next question is when is Harbor Street being done, and when are Pier and Nautical being done, and when's Wallace and Marina being done, and we can just name all the roads down there when they're being done. And then, all the roads everywhere else too. So there was a list once upon a time given to members of council about 3 years ago that gave us a sense over the course of the next 5, 6, 7 years what was going to happen and when. understanding that that is always a moving target, sometimes based on funding models, sometimes based on grants. But I think if you remind me, Mr. Mikeman, I can give you the document that I'm talking about, and perhaps you could have that updated and provided to council when time permits.
I will remind you.
Very kind. Is that fair? Yeah, I think just a better global sense of roadways rather than one off. Yeah. Any further questions on the motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. There are no items for information purposes. There is nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first bylaw is with regard to zoning bylaw amendment Z01 2023. At Brighton Gateway, it's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Anderson. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140/2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands described as Part Lots 1 and 2, Plan 28, Parts 1 and 2 of Plan 39R 13950, subject to an easement as in ND 177859, subject to an easement as in ND 221315, Municipality of Brighton. Any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And bylaw for subdivision agreement, Applewood Phase 3. It's moved by Councillor Wright, and I'll need a seconder that the council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a subdivision agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton and 8597685 Canada Inc. regarding Phase 3 of a plan of subdivision. Is there a seconder? Deputy Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Bylaw for subdivision agreement, Butler Creek. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a subdivision agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton and 2020910 Ontario Limited regarding a plan of subdivision. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. That brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery that has a question with regard to anything on tonight's agenda? Mrs. Duxbury. And just because I know your name, you still have to say your name into the microphone. And I'll just read this little blurb before you do. Question period is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions about items that appeared on this evening's agenda. Members are asked to state their name for the record before asking their question. A maximum of 5 minutes is set aside for question period. Language, content, and conduct must remain respectful at all times. Questions will be received and answered by the mayor or by a member of council or staff if designated by the mayor. Mrs. Duxbury, if you push the button in front of you.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. A lot of this staff, this current staff, does not know what we have been through with this development in Butler Creek. A lot of you are fairly new, but we are right beside this development. And I think that some of you need to know what has actually been going on in this development and why our frustration levels are through the roof at the moment. First of all, Mr. Walsh, I would like to speak to you in regards to the vibration control measures. Those tractors and those bulldozers, they are 10 feet away from my home. Not 100 feet, not 200 feet, they are 10. And they go back and forth consistently throughout the day. I've lost items in my home. Things have fallen off the walls. My glasses rattle in my cupboards. If I open them, they will fall. So something should be done about some sort of vibration control. We have a brand new backyard. We just put a swimming pool in last year, and I do not want to see this construction traffic have any negative impacts on our backyard. That's number one.
So if I'm reading you correctly, your question might be something like,
my question is,
what can be done with regard to vibration control?
Yes, please.
Okay, next question.
What will you do? Next question. Now, Mr. Fred has covered some of this, but my question is, When will you go to this developer in regards to color and conformity? I was at the development that he currently has in Port Hope this morning. They are all white siding. They are all green roofs. This is in no way or no doubt an extension of our neighborhood. They are right there when we walk out of our door. So if there is something about conformity and color, these do not blend in with what we currently have. And you talk about that, they talked about that for those apartment buildings, even, that they should be conformed to consisting colors around the area. We do not have one single white home with a green roof in our area.
So the question would be, when will staff go to the developer with regard to the color of the condominiums?
That's right.
All right, next question, please.
Next question is parking. This is a major fact for us, as we do not want our beautiful street at the moment turning into a parking lot, as has happened in other developments in the area. 1.5 spots per unit is not enough. I can't say any more about people saying that they assume that it will be seniors buying these condominiums. It could very well be a young family just trying to get into the housing market. That family will need probably 2 vehicles because there are no services or amenities south of the tracks. They will have to get to and from work somehow. So please, I can't say enough that they are geared towards widowers. That's simply not the case. Anyone can buy these units, anyone at all. And then you have the turnover. Say someone doesn't want to live there. They can't stay there. They can't sell it either. So it becomes a rental. Then what happens in this community when these turn into rentals?
So the question might be, will there be any parking mitigation beyond the 1.5 per unit?
Right. Now, at his other, at the units he has in Port Hope and Coburg, there is overflow parking. There is no overflow parking in Brighton. Where are the visitors? Where are the family members? Where are guests going to park? There's very limited amount of public parking spots. And if some of these residents decide, hey, I need a second spot and I'm going to pay that $5,000 for the second spot, that eats up even more of the parking that should be available for overflow.
So where will visitors park?
That's right.
You have another question.
Another question is about snow removal and storage. Where will snow removal and storage be done within that complex to as not affect the existing residents?
Do you have any other questions?
I do, about garbage. When I drove through the complex this morning, I was a little surprised to see not 1, but 4 separate large garbage container bin areas in the complex. I do not think that it's fair to us that these should be anywhere near our existing homes. We don't want rodents. We don't want the smell. So where in that park, where will these storage facilities be for garbage and waste control? And then I have another question about traffic control. What will be done about traffic? You cannot say that in this one area alone, let alone what Toby's doing, let alone what Myzik is doing, that this will not affect traffic in our town. It most definitely will. How will that traffic be mitigated?
Do you have any other questions?
Nope.
All right, let's go to the top. What can be done with regard to vibration control? I believe Mr. Walsh already discussed with us about the MECP having policies around that, and it was discussed with staff about a policy for vibration control in the community, and we can expect to hear something back from staff one way or the other about that. In the meantime, I'm putting words in your mouth, Director Walsh, but if there are vibration concerns, residents should contact the MECP.
Who?
Hang on.
Yes, Mayor, that would be a first good step. And for the benefit of the audience, the Ministry of the Environment
Yeah, MECP is the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. That's who takes care of vibration issues. As it turns out, our member of provincial parliament is the minister, so you have a direct channel through Mr.
The problem
Pecuniary.
is they're not maintained.
You asked, we answered. You asked about vibration control. The answer is you go to the MECP if you have concerns about it. Your next question was, when will staff go to the developer with regard to color of the condos? Director Walsh, do you have an answer for that one?
All I can say is this week that we'll have a conversation with the proponent, but again, with Bill 23, it would only be out of interest of the developer to do so. That would make a change from the current elevation drawings that's presented. We won't find anything in the agreement at the end of the day on that.
But this week you will have the conversation.
That's correct.
Thank you. The next question was parking control, 1.5 spots. Will there be any parking mitigation beyond the 1.5 spots per unit? I'm guessing the answer is no, Director Walsh.
That's correct. The extent of parking has been provided in accordance with the zoning bylaw, and that has been passed.
Thank you. Is there any provision for visitor or guest parking?
Same thing, the zoning bylaw does provide for that, and it's again, the site plans that we would be finally approving will be in conformity with the zoning bylaw.
And snow removal and storage?
That will be the responsibility of the condominium on the site. There won't be any permitted snow storage on the street.
And the condo is required to remove its own snow, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Where will garbage be stored?
There's going to be garbage stored within one of its parking spaces, one of its shared parking spaces.
There'll be garbage storage there?
Yes.
But where?
We're still having those conversations out, actually.
Thank you. And what will be done about traffic in the community, and how will we be mitigating any traffic issues? I know there was a traffic study done with regard to this subdivision. Can we speak to that? And has it been updated, or will it be?
That's correct. There was a traffic impact study done to support this development. They're very specialized type of agreements or reports. I don't remember some of the ins and outs of it, but and there has been no updates. No, there hasn't been any need for updates. Sometimes in our agreements, we say that any development that takes more than 5 years to build out, that they need to do an update, because it all very dependent on the existing background conditions. So they have to look at the background conditions again and update things. For this, I don't anticipate that we didn't make that a provision of the agreement, but we probably should have some general provision like that in the site plan control agreement. I think what we'll be doing is probably relying on the master transportation plan that's pending to speak to the big picture on traffic.
In this area and other areas of the community. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Duxbury.
Thank you.
Mrs. Richardson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Brenda Richardson, 104 Raglan Street. My question is in regards to my concerns with Butler Creek, as our deputy mayor has said. I would like to know why this resolution was never followed. Resolution 2018-71 from meeting February the 5th, 2018. Moved by Councillor John Martinello, second by Councillor Brian Ostrander. Council further directs that all of this, whereas the Insurance Bureau of Canada states that the climate change is causing severe weather events, especially storms involving floods, to happen more frequently and with greater intensity. Whereas water damage are now the most common cause of home insurance claims. Whereas the Brighton residential area south of the railroad tracks is a very highly developed, low-lying, end of drainage and flood-prone area. And whereas in order to protect Brighton and taxpayers' lives and homes from the dangers of flooding, now therefore council requests that the Lower Trent Conservation Authority, in brackets LTC, develops and plans and marks up all removable fallen trees and other obstructions for the removal of fallen trees and other obstructions from the section of Butler Creek south of Highway 2. And further, council requests that LTC have this plan completed no later than April 30th, 2018. That's on the follow-up list.
Yeah, I believe council did make the request to the LTCA. I'm not sure that.
I remember the meeting, your worship, and the representative from LTC was here, and she said that nobody could seem to get together with any staff or council, that their times were always conflicting, so it was never done.
It's interesting that Councillor Martinella was our rep at the LTCA during that period.
He
of
was
time.
kicked off
He was not kicked off.
because he didn't
was not
attend the
kicked off.
meetings.
He was not kicked off the lower trend.
Anyway, the Butler Creek, it really concerns me with all the water, with our rain events that we've been having. We hear it all the time that it's going to continue to happen. We've had ice jams there. If that road was to cave in, we've seen floods in other cities, towns, countries, and what happens to roads when they cave in. We know that road is extremely old. I would doubt that Mr. Whiteman could find a date with the last time those pipes were flushed. And those trees that were cut down along the side, all the sticks and everything are all laying there. They're all just going to go in there. They're going to plug it up. And okay, that's enough on that. And then actually too, if you go to the Stormwater Master Plan, there's quite a write-up in regards to Butler Creek and what's happening in regards to development and sediment and what should and should not be done.
Before you go on to your next question, Director Whiteman, are we monitoring Butler Creek, especially at the south end?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so, not to my knowledge. And,
Maybe we can have a
Ignore that.
conversation offline. Thank you.
Well,
Next question.
just to add to that, remember quite a while ago there, because Janet Noyes put an RFP on there because they're supposed to be doing a conducting a survey on Butler Creek, correct?
yes, that's true.
And payable from the municipality, but you were supposed to request funding, but that's another story.
Yes, they are providing half of the funding.
Are they?
Yes.
Okay, has it started? Have they started it?
I believe they have, but I stand to be corrected.
Is it Janet? No, it's Janet Noyes, right?
Yes, it is, but
is it-
she has left.
Yeah, she's retired.
Yes,
Oh, really?
yes.
Oh, who took her place?
Somebody else. Sorry, Gage Como.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to ask Councillor Wielden because he's our rep at the LTCA, as is
Oh.
Councillor Wright.
Okay, and also, why was there no update to the traffic study that you brought up? During the public meeting, at that meeting, Deputy Mayor Laura Vink, I apologize. She had explained that she could not understand it with all these arrows. This is what she did, and neither could we. And she requested that there be more clarity, and we brought in, and I've never ever seen one. And for I mean, no disrespect to Mr. Kane, but I cannot see these people pulling out of that subdivision and driving across to Forest Drive or sitting there waiting for cars to go back and forth when they want to turn left. Meanwhile, there's 40 cars lined up at the train tracks because the train has just gone by. These people are going to turn right to go to Trenton. They are not going to go down Forest Drive and have to go through 5 stop signs. They're going to fly down Cedar Street, hang a left onto Harbor, and away they go. And it's just going to be, it's going to be a mess. It really is. And I believe, at the best of my knowledge, they had said that there was going to be a sidewalk. Preston Parkinson, when he was the director of Public Works, he made the commitments, saying that at a meeting that he was going to go after more developers for financial aid to put in the sidewalks because they were having so many more pedestrians. And he did say that stretch on Cedar Street to go into town is the main route. And I mentioned this to Mr. Whiteman, and he said he was going to make a note of it. I think an updated traffic study should be done, and it should include pedestrians, bicycles, and wheelchairs.
So we can anticipate that will be included in the what are we calling it? The transportation master plan. Thank you, Mr. Whiteman.
Okay.
And with regard to sidewalk, we did hear there was significant sidewalk contribution from this developer for sidewalks on Cedar Street.
Good.
Embedded in the subdivision agreement.
Okay. Could I just get clarification on where this water is actually going? Is it going to Butler Creek, or is it going to Harbor Point Pond, or is it half and half?
The water that goes into the system is 50% to Harbor Point Pond and 50% to Butler Creek, as I understand it.
Because that email that I received and I forwarded to everybody from Janet Noy, she specifically said that no water was going into Harbor Point Pond. That
I believe that was on the very first drawing.
said it was after the technical review.
On the very first drawings we received, all the water was intended to go to Butler Creek. And the municipality immediately went to the developer and said, not going to happen. We've done the work at Harbor Point Pond specifically to take water from this area of the community. So you need to redo your technical drawings. And they did.
Also in this agreement, it was mentioned the cost sharing agreement that the town had with Toby Development, and that this developer, Mr. LeBlanc, was to pay 112,000 plus in regard towards what the municipality had already paid. I'd like to know who's responsible and who will follow up and make sure that the developer actually pays that money.
I have that recollection as well. Is that embedded in the subdivision agreement?
It is indeed an agreement, and that has been communicated with the developer.
Thank you.
The only reason I bring that up is because in that cost sharing agreement, it stated that Toby Development was to pay $10,000 towards the tree planting that happened around the pond. I contacted the finance department a year after the trees are in. They knew nothing about it. They contacted the planning department with no response. So I waited another 2-3 weeks and contacted the finance department, and they just sent a bill on their own to the developer, which tells me that it's not up to the finance department to make sure all these fees and charges and everything are being paid. So somebody down in the planning department should be following up and making sure that, there was $112,000 that was missed, or I'm sorry.
To be clear, it is up to the finance department to make sure fees and charges are paid. That's
So they're to keep
their
track.
job.
Okay, thank you. So that means that they're to be following all these pre-servicing agreements and everything to make sure that
One hopes that the team works together, and I know they do, but yes, the finance department's responsibility is to follow the bouncing ball of the decisions of council and collect the fees and charges as required.
It's just, I find it very discouraging that, $10,000 is not a lot of money today, but how many $10,000 or $100,000 have been missed and not
No,
paid?
we certainly hope none, and we're glad the finance department has invoiced Toby for the $10,000 they owe.
He did pay it, she said so. Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Council.
Any other questions, sir? Yeah, Randy, come on up. Yeah, whatever. It's getting late. Sorry, I should just say, we do allot 5 minutes for question period. Council's okay that we keep going. Let the citizens have their say. Go ahead, Randy. Thank you. If you could push the button in front of you and then state your name for the record, please.
Randy Smith,
Thank you, Randy.
15 Pier Drive. Just one question on the traffic flow. Does that also include traffic management, i.e. stop signs and things like that placement? Because I know myself personally, and I think a lot of people in Brighton, on Cedar Street, the traffic can get so bad that when you pull out, you've got somebody on your tail. And the last one followed me all the way up to the Sobe store, cut me off and wanted to get out and fight. So that's one example of my thinking that, if you're going to do traffic management, then you need to start now. And the other one is getting out onto Main Street at Ontario at the Y. I don't know about you, but I have to pull all the way out almost into the traffic to be able to see what way is going right. So if you're going to do anything in the short term, and I stress anything, then you at least look at those two locations. One is Beacon at Cedar, and the other one is at Main at Ontario Street. Because right now, to my way of thinking, there are dangerous things to happen. Last thing, it's not really a question, sir, but it's just a statement. It's supporting of Cheryl. I too live we've had the steamrollers at the back of our property, right on the property line. They go up and down, and they don't start at 8 o'clock in the morning. They start their motors at 6 o'clock in the morning. 6:30, they're starting to move. 7 o'clock, the trucks are going up and down. And our house shakes just the same as Cheryl's. And it's that you can just feel the earth pounding. So to call something like MEC, which is a government agency, I think, as far as I'm concerned, we pay taxes to the city of Brighton. Brighton should manage our concerns with the developer and take up our request to support us in this activity, because
I agree 100%.
why am I going to fight with the feds or the province?
Yeah, well, hang on, Cheryl. I agree 100% with the fact that we should be dealing with the developer, especially with regard to when they're starting work. If they're starting at 6 a.m., that's a no-no in Brighton. So can we please have a conversation with the developer and or his contractors as required to make sure they're not starting in advance of when our bylaw permits, which I think is 7:30.
You're lucky if it's 7:30 because.
Yeah, well, no,
it's
it could be
7 o'clock,
7:30,
you know.
right? Is
I
it 7,
pull my- I
7:30?
Pull my blinds back and I can see.
Is it
them out
7?
there. Oh, they start before 7.
Bro, Brenda knows. Brenda knows all our bylaws. We should hire her as our bylaw enforcement officer.
Okay,
right?
but that's the same as the vibration, right? You
Yeah.
know your bylaws, but nobody.
Well,
can-
our bylaws do not include vibration. So that is a Ministry of Environment issue. If you're having vibration issues, you do have to call the Ministry of Environment and get them involved. We can't control and we don't have the staff to be monitoring vibration issues.
So if you put yourself in my spot and you have the mayor of the town telling you, it ain't my problem, it's yours. I'm going to manage dealing with the developer through the MEC, the Ministry of Environment.
You should call the MECP. They have a 1-800 emergency line. That's exactly where you know what? Give your MPP a call.
Yeah.
Because he's the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks.
But I know you say you don't, anyways, I'm beating a dead horse. So just the vibration issue is a big issue for us, but the traffic control is another big one because just adding on to what Cheryl said, sometimes there are people parking on our street. I can't back out of my driveway because the cars are lined up in front of me. And I'm having a hard time backing up, trying to figure out how to get in and out of my own driveway. And that's summer again. So if there's going to be construction cars, people parking there, et cetera, it's going to be bad for us for the foreseeable future. So anyways.
Thanks, Randy. Can we have a conversation with the developer about where their staff are parking their vehicles as well, so as not to impact the residents?
They probably aren't right now because it's a cul-de-sac, but when all
No,
that
but they will.
opens up and then everybody starts parking there, it's going to be.
It's worth having the proactive conversation about it though, Randy.
Yeah.
I agree.
And sorry if I turn a little red, I get a little emotional.
Understood. You're living right beside a development. I get it. I've been there in the city. I understand exactly what you're going
This is
through.
Brighton.
Well,
This is the smallest.
it's Brighton and you live beside a development property. It was,
years ago because
Yeah.
it was nice and quiet and tranquil. And sure, the
Right.
world's taken us over.
and
I don't have.
and the folks who live south of you didn't like the fact that your house was being built. I guarantee that.
South of us. So you mean Sven or.
Well, no, I mean in the neighborhood south of you off of Raglan Street, right? I mean, nobody likes when new developments are
I don't
built. That's a
really
true story.
As long as things like they don't start ahead of time. I don't have to worry about when I open my drapes, I can see somebody out there with a hammer looking in my house. No, I don't mind all that stuff or that my house is shaking.
Yeah, staff are
That's
gonna
the one part that. I don't
Staff are
like.
gonna have a conversation with the developer when they
I
start
can't
work.
Sit in my basement with it because the whole house just
Yeah.
through the basement vibrates. So, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Any other questions for question period, sir?
Do I have to sign in again?
No, not for this part.
Mr.
You do have to
Mayor,
state your name.
Conrad Ostner.
There you go.
I live at 17 Pier Drive, which is right bordering the construction. My concern is when this started, one of the first plans came out and it showed a fence going down the property. And then a further plan came out and I saw it and I talked to Mr. LeBlanc at the time, Councillor LeBlanc, and I'm assuming he talked to Deputy Mayor Anderson about it because at the meeting he brought up the question why is the fence not there anymore, and the deputy mayor at the time, I can't remember her name, sorry.
Laura Connect.
She questioned it as well, and there was a lady from the developers who did the diagram and that sort of thing said, "Oh, we're not finished with it yet." Okay, so about 3 months later, I went to the town workplace and I said, "What's anything new?" "No, not right now, and I'll send you an email when when something comes up. I said, okay. And now this comes to council and it shows the diagram or the layout and still no fence. Was anything brought up?
I'm going to ask Director Walsh.
I'm just checking the development plan. The development plan in the report is an earlier version that went with the draft approval of the subdivision. We're into the site plan control stage now, and there are some fences details on that plan. So that's not part of today's package, but I can look back on that. So I have made a note when I heard that comment tweaked, and I said, oh, I don't remember, I didn't examine that part of the plan per se to recall quickly whether there's a fence along that limit or not. There is along the north limit where there is some special attention given along the parkland block, but I'd have to take another look for this particular area.
Will you communicate with Mr. Hauser
I will.
about that, please? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Anyone else for questions? We're the only ones on Zoom. How nice for us. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Council meeting held on May 8th, 2023. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And finally, a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the May 8th, 2023 planning meeting adjourn at 9:46 PM. Is there any discussion? Well, apparently I need to learn to tell time. Good thing my wife teaches grade 2. Adjourn at 8:46 PM. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you, everyone. Drive safely home.